Some kids love it, some kids hate it, but one thing stands true. All Metro West teens need it. I'm Evan Berkowitz, and today we're talking about community service hours in our area's high schools. In a moment, we'll be talking with an expert in the subject, but first, some statistics. All of the high schools in Metro West require community service, but just how much for each school? Of the high schools that post their requirements online, Ashland comes out on top, requiring 100 hours of service. Next is Dover-Sherburne, which requires 40 hours, then Natick and Wayland with 30 hours apiece, and finally my very own Lincoln-Sudbury, which only requires 15 hours. Joining me now is Marie Schwartz, the founder of Teen Life, an organization which helps teens worldwide find experiential learning and community service opportunities across the globe. Ms. Schwartz, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
And first off, we're going to be talking about how did Teen Life come about?
So Teen Life is a traditional media company. What that means is we create content and we push it out to a target audience. Our target audience happens to be families with college-bound teens, generally. Teens who are looking for ways to engage outside of school. So what we do is we research and we organize information on our website and in our guides that help teens find meaningful things to do when they're not in school. So community service is actually a very popular part of our site.
And how did it start? It was not just a website to begin with. No. It was these booklets. Could you tell us some about that?
Sure. I actually was a volunteer at my son's school at the PTA, and I happened to be co-chair of the Community Service Committee. And all the families that we worked with said, where can I go to do community service with my child? So I started Teen Life Media first to put together a list of summer programs for students who were 12 and older, because that was another issue parents had. And then the second thing I did was put together a guide to community service. And then I also added a community service fair, which I saw existed in some other, for some other
areas.
Groups. Yeah, or there's one at the Prudential Center every year.
Okay.
That is held for young adults who are looking to do community service. And colleges have community service fairs all the time for their students, but nothing was being done for students.
For high schoolers.
Students. So that was how we got into community service.
And what programs do you do? Who goes out and finds these listings, etc.?
Great. Well, we have high school and college interns. That's how we got started, who basically went to all the college fairs. They looked online. There are lots of directories, and we actually asked each organization, would they be willing to take teens? Because usually that's not something that's posted on a website. So we actually had an online survey. They had to fill it out. They told us what their minimum age requirements were. And in some cases we said, okay, so maybe someone can't work directly with your clients for whatever reason, but can they collect goods? Can they collect clothing? Can they collect, toiletries?
Such as like a soup kitchen type place?
Exactly, right. And so, that might not be a great place for a kid to work, say, in the kitchen, but the students can do lots of other wonderful things. And those are the kinds of opportunities we would ask about, and we gathered those and put them in a guide.
One thing you talk about a lot in your website is experiential learning. Could you define that and talk about where that comes from for you?
Well, for me, experiential means learning by doing, as opposed to sitting in front of a teacher who's telling you. I think a lot of students don't learn as well sometimes by reading a book as they do by doing. Just like you are right now, you're learning all about the profession of being a broadcast journalist by doing it. And if someone were to just stand there and tell you and describe it to you, you wouldn't learn as much. So I think I personally learn best when I'm actually doing something involved in that project, or get that kind of experience. I grew up overseas, for example, and I was able to learn French in a much different way than had I just been sitting in a classroom here in the U.S. So experiential learning means exactly that, doing it by experience. And
community service. You said it's a big part of your business and your organization.
Yes.
How do you work with schools?
Yep.
How do you get this out?
Well, community service is probably one of the 7 areas of content on our site. So we have our marketing efforts are directed at contacting schools, usually guidance counselors, and we say to them, look, if your students need the guidance counselors usually don't have time to research this.
Of course.
So they love us. They direct students to our site all the time. We give them bookmarks, we give them guides, and guidance counselors just hand it out. So if a student's looking for community service, the first thing they might see is our guide to community service, but they can also go to our website and see hundreds, lots and lots of opportunities that we update constantly. And we do that, really, there's no cost to the student, there's no cost to parents, there's no cost to educators. It's really great.
I'm sure. And your organization, it is a company, is not a nonprofit. Just quickly, could you tell us a little bit on why?
So I started out by selling things to parents, selling guides, and there was a lot of resistance to that because they thought, it shouldn't cost me anything to volunteer. So we realized that there's a whole group of businesses out there, summer programs, it could be test prep services, driving schools, people who work with teens and, for a living, who would be willing to advertise on our website and in our guides. And so I was able to deliver the content that parents wanted for free to the parents just by using advertising revenue. And that also frees me up not to have to go raise money, because nonprofits, they still have expenses.
Yes.
And if I was a nonprofit, I'd be spending all my time out there raising money, and possibly even asking parents to donate money, which I didn't want to do.
And finally, I hear you've got some plans for the future, possibly a magazine. Could you tell us about it?
Yeah, so parents, we've discovered, and teens, so parenting kids is different than parenting teens. Teens need to be developed. They need encouragement. They need opportunities to become independent. And so a lot of parents need help sometimes when they get to the teen years figuring out what to do. Also, kids in the same family can be very different. And there's no publication and no resource out there that just targets parents with teens. It's always parents with little kids, parents with babies.
And you see that a lot.
So we looked at all the media out there that were focused on parenting and realized that there's a void. There's a
nice niche for you guys to fill.
Exactly, and it's really an underserved audience. People are afraid. They don't know how to reach parents with teens. Parents with teens tend not to be online as much, so it's harder to reach them, and they don't all go to the same sort of businesses, like they don't go
like
to
a daycare or a gymboree type place.
It's harder to find them, and they don't show up at schools as much either.
Yeah, because there's not as much of that connection between the parents and the teachers as there is in, say, an elementary school.
Right, so we are launching a magazine, and we've decided it's called Life with Teens.
Life with Teens, we're straight to the point.
Right, and it contains both articles that concern parents and possibly kids, like the first one is on helicopter parenting and how that impacts teens in a different way than little kids. Both have issues.
Of course.
But teens especially need to be encouraged to be more independent.
And let free a little bit.
Exactly. And helicopter parenting tends to not allow that child to be as independent. So, and the other article for next time, which is in September, will be on teens and divorce. There's a lot of times during high school especially that parents start thinking about this, and it seems to come up a lot. So we're talking about how that impacts teens.
And quick question, a couple questions ago, you mentioned 7 areas on your website. Do you know those 7 off the top of your head? Could you tell us?
Yes, I do. So probably the biggest one is summer programs. There are programs where students go where they stay overnight. So there's a section called Overnight Summer Programs. We actually have a huge listing of programs not only in the U.S. but also abroad. And then we have a section on local summer programs. Those are programs you can do while living at home.
Such a day camp type thing, but for older kids?
Right. Like Berkeley has a summer program for high school students interested in music. There are art classes. There are theater classes. They tend to be more specialized. As kids get older, they start having specific interests. So it's not really the traditional camp, that you might have attended. So there's robotics, and there's all this interesting stuff. You can even do community service at a camp or at a summer program. So summer programs are the biggest. We also have a big, huge listing of secondary school options, so everything from private schools to semester schools. Like you could go as a student, as a junior, to Colorado, to Vermont, abroad, and get your high school credits somewhere else. And not too many people know about those. I personally am a big fan of that. So we encourage that. We also are starting a listing of online courses you can take as a high school student.
Oh, right.
Yep. So education is another area. Another area is gap year programs. Do you know what that is?
In between high school and college.
Right. So some students opt to just take a year, maybe 2, to figure out what they want to
Learn
do.
about themselves.
Exactly. And there are programs out there that cater specifically to that student. So they tend to involve travel, and they're very, very good for students who are just trying to find out more about the world and about themselves.
All right.
And then they end up going to college being more prepared.
Exactly.
So that's a big one. Community service I mentioned. There's a whole section on how to find a job or internship.
That's always good, especially in
Right.
this time.
Right, so not everything we have on our site has to cost money. We show students how to put a resume together, how to write a cover letter.
That's
how to-
very useful information.
Right.
No one teaches that.
Right, and some schools do, some high schools have a little bit of help with that, but not many. It's usually something that gets cut.
You know, I know you've got a couple more realms to go, but
Yeah.
I was listening to an interview that you did with somebody online earlier, and you were talking about the sort of topics that fall through the cracks, such as personal finance.
Right.
Could you talk about that?
Well, that's not, yes, that is very important to us. We are writing an article about that in our next in the magazine. On the site, there isn't so much on that right now, but it's something that I strongly believe in. A lot of students today don't know enough about credit cards, how they work, what interest rates mean, what paying your balance on time means, and what, so loans,
and just how to
insurance.
balance those books.
Yes.
Well, Marie Schwartz, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, and please tell please sign up for Life with Teens magazine by going to teenlife.com/mag, M-A-G, and you'll be on your way. You'll get an issue in your mailbox.
Good. And thank you again. And for everyone here at YBA, I'm Evan Berkowitz, YBA News, Natick.